I'm David Jagneaux, the Strategic Communications Manager at First Contact Entertainment. Yeah, Firewall Ultra is definitely it's an evolution of the franchise. So for our main game mode, the download game mode, the rule set's mostly the same. The main difference is that now it is a 3-round rule, and instead of just playing a single match, it's best of 3. So you get more time in the game before you have to go to another load screen. It's dedicated servers now, so you won't get kicked out if someone leaves the match. And it's also much faster load times because of the SSD on the PS5. And then all of the new features in the PSVR 2 really help elevate the experience a lot. I think, for example, the eye tracking enables foveated rendering. So we're able to render the game at a much higher resolution, better frame rate, better stability, and it plays much more smoothly as a result of that. And also the eye tracking really helps gameplay too. I don't know if you saw when you were playing, but you can close your eyes to avoid the effects of the flashbang. And you can close one eye to kind of aim down your rifle better. You can use eye tracking to pick your weapon. And whenever you switch the cameras, you can actually look with your eyes at the enemies to highlight them for your teammates. So we tried to think of ways to use those new features in ways that enhance the game, rather than just using them just because. And I think we've really elevated Firewall Ultra to feel like a truly, big step up for the genre. Personally, I love the PSA controller. I thought it was a fantastic peripheral. But now on the PSVR 2, we do have 2 separate hands with the Sense controllers. So that does enable you to do a few things that you couldn't do with the aim controller. For example, you can take your hand off of your gun and move it around, make hand signals to your teammates. You can more naturally, use one-handed weapons like a pistol or a knife or different gadgets. You don't have to point a gun anymore. Now you can just, use your hand and move it around realistically. And then we've also developed the ADS features, the aim down sight feature, where on a typical non-VR game, you would push L2 and it would bring the gun up to your face and you can aim down the sight. But in VR, you can just physically do that. But since we don't have a physical weapon anymore, like the aim, it's hard to really stabilize sometimes with 2 hands. So we have our feature where you push L2 while aiming and it stabilizes it, so it feels more like you're holding a gun. So that lets you get more accurate, and it kind of stabilizes your aim a little bit, and kind of makes it more accessible. So if you don't have a lot of VR shooter experience, you can still aim accurately. And so that was a big thing for us, is just making the game feel good. Even if you don't have a lot of VR experience, you can still jump in, and after just a couple rounds, you'll be able to sort of get the hang of things. Yeah, I think the grenade is a good example of that, because in VR, sometimes when you try to throw something in VR, it doesn't always go exactly where you want it to, because you don't have a physical weight in your hand that you're releasing. So it's just hard to predict and really do that accurately. So we found that instead, if you aim with your eyes and then just release the trigger, you still get that interaction of looking where you want it to go, but you don't have to physically move your arm. Instead, you just release the button and it goes where you want it to by where you're looking. So that is a good accessibility feature, like you mentioned. I think that makes it so that you don't have to teach someone how to release a button, or have them throw the controller out of their hand or something. Instead, the eye tracking really kind of makes it to where everyone's on the same playing field. Yeah, I think for Firewall Ultra, we're really focused on making it accessible and playable by anyone. So we do like having the reload button. I think that what you lose in the interaction, you gain in the ability to stay focused on the combat. I think it keeps you grounded in the experience. It really, instead of having to fiddle around or mess up or drop something, it's push a button and you're focused right there. You're still in the firefight. And I think that is a great accessibility feature, because it makes it easy for anyone to reload the gun, which is great. But it also, I think it is just a good example of how you can combine traditional shooter things with VR in a way that feels good and it feels immersive still. Things like the animation for when you're reloading your gun, a lot of work went into that, and I think the characters look good when they're doing it. One of the benefits of that as well is whenever you're watching another player, you don't see them kind of mess around and their arms get all weird or something. Instead, the game looks great all the time. So the animations look good. The players are always doing what you expect them to be doing. So I think that helps with immersion too, because if you drop something or mess up, that can take you out of the experience just as much. And so what I've noticed is that whenever I play, I quickly forget that I'm just pushing the button. And it kind of becomes second nature, and I'm still focused on the firefight still. I think the easy answer that is kind of a cop-out answer is just everything. Everything's important, but I guess to get more specific, I think the visuals. A lot of the time, the way that you depict things in VR is different than it would be on a 2D screen. So, for example, in a non-VR game, it's very simple to have a cutscene, to have the players, what they're looking at be, driven by the game engine, will move around, or cutscenes will depict things in different ways. But in VR, you can't take control away from the player's head. You don't want to force them to look at something. So we have to design the game in a way that can convey information, especially for tutorials, in a way that is where no matter where the player's looking or what they're doing, they can still get the information. So that's a tricky thing. It's also very important for VR, I found, is that the lighting. Whenever you're in a dark area, it can feel almost claustrophobic or kind of oppressive with how dark some areas can be. And so with Unreal Engine 5, we're able to do dynamic lighting with each flashlight and all the light sources and the different levels, and that really adds a lot of depth to the game, because when you're moving through the darkness physically, it can feel a lot different than when you're just looking at a TV screen. And I think the sound is another good example of the 3D audio. What I like to do is just wait by the laptop if I'm a defender and just listen, because I can hear where the attackers are coming from. In some cases, I can hear them reload, or maybe try to open a door, or all those sounds you can really hear around you. And I think that just elevates things even more, because on a 2D screen you can push the stick to move and look around, but whenever you feel it and you hear it and you physically turn, I think that that just makes it so much more immersive. No. No, the game is designed hand in hand with Unreal Engine 5. I think we recently did a Q&A on the Unreal blog, and they let us know that we're one of the first VR games that will be shipped on Unreal Engine 5. And the game takes full advantage of it. Without Unreal 5, there is no Firewall Ultra. That it's enabled us to do the things that we've done. I think motion sickness is it's such an important topic in VR, because there's one thing if someone doesn't like your game, but if they physically get sick when they play it, that you just can't have that. And I think nowadays, and with PSVR 2, the technology is just so much better, so it's less likely that someone's going to get motion sick. And now that more people have experienced VR, they're more used to that sort of movement. But then beyond that, I think PSVR 2, the game runs very smoothly. It's a stable frame rate, which is a big factor whenever it comes to motion sickness. And things like foveated rendering allow us to make sure that what you're looking at is always very sharp and smooth. And we have a lot of features in the game as well that are common industry standards, like adding the vignette to your vision when you turn or move. You can also do snap turning. You don't have to do smooth turning. And also here, everyone played standing up. That does help as well. If you're standing and if you physically turn your body, that makes a big difference. And it's great to hear. I haven't personally heard of anyone getting sick in Firewall Ultra. So I think the team's done a great job of making it feel good to play all the time, for sure. one of the great things about developing for PSVR 2 exclusively is we know you're going to have a wire. You know, everyone who plays the game is going to have a wire. So some of the ways the game's been designed is to limit your movement whenever you don't need to. So for example, when you bring up a menu, it's always right where you're looking, so you don't have to turn and search for it, which is a big factor for sure. And the game can be played seated if you would like, or just standing still. You know, you don't have to physically move around. And thankfully the game is relatively slow paced. So you're kind of creeping through hallways, you're kind of tactically moving around. So there aren't many situations where you're going to quickly turn and potentially trip because you're kind of slowly looking and turning. So I think that helps a lot. Personally, you know, you kind of forget the wires there eventually because it is very long. And you know, you can set up your play space in a way that you're not going to step over it as much. So it's a game that encourages you to be very careful and very aware of your surroundings. So I think that helps. I think for me, what excites me the most is just the visual fidelity of the game. I think Firewall Ultra looks incredible. Visually, you know, to me it's a game where you can watch someone playing it on the TV and it still looks great. And you don't have to say, you know, it looks great for a VR game. I think it just looks great across the board. I think Unreal Engine 5 has really helped us elevate the visuals. The lighting looks great. It's just a very visually impressive game, and so I think to me that's what stands out the most for sure. Firewall Ultra is, you know, the most impressive next-gen VR game I've ever played.